You know that feeling when you're so used to being invisible that you actually start to believe you don't deserve to be seen? That was my life for 22 years. My name is Seraphina Valdez, and I want to tell you about the day everything changed. But first, let me paint you a picture of what my world looked like before that moment, when a stranger mistook me for someone I never thought I could be. Every morning at 5 a.m., my alarm would pierce through the thin walls of our tiny apartment in Monterey Bay. The sound of the ocean was always there. This constant reminder of how close we lived to beauty we could never quite reach. I'd roll out of bed, my feet hitting the cold linoleum floor, and immediately feel the weight of another day pressing down on my shoulders. Not just the emotional weight, though that was heavy enough, but the actual physical weight of my body that had been my prison since I was 8 years old. The mirror in our bathroom was cracked right down the middle, and I used to think it was fitting. Everything about me felt broken anyway. I'd splash cold water on my face, avoiding my own reflection, and head to the kitchen to make coffee for my mom, Esperanza. She worked double shifts cleaning hotel rooms for tourists who probably spent more on one dinner than we made in a week. The least I could do was have her coffee ready before she dragged herself to another day of scrubbing other people's messes. Our apartment was a study in making do with less. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Mrs. Chen next door watching her morning talk shows. The volume always too loud because she was going deaf, but too proud to admit it. The smell of bacon from the family upstairs would drift down and make my stomach growl. But we hadn't had bacon in months. Mom always said we were saving for something better. But I was starting to think better was just a word we used to make ourselves feel less stuck. The walk to work was 40 minutes each way because taking the bus cost money we didn't have. 40 minutes of walking past all the beautiful people jogging along the coastal path. Their perfect bodies moving with an ease I'd never known. 40 minutes of catching my reflection in shop windows and quickly looking away. 40 minutes of arriving at Ocean's Pearl, already exhausted before my shift even began. Ocean's Pearl was supposed to be one of the finest dining establishments in Monterey Bay, the kind of place where celebrities ate when they wanted to be seen but still feel exclusive. The building itself was stunning, all glass and steel jutting out over the water so diners could watch the sunset while they sipped wine that cost more than my rent. But for those of us who worked there, it was a daily reminder of the invisible line between the people who belonged and the people who served. I was a waitress, though that word doesn't really capture what the job meant for someone like me. When you're overweight and poor, you become part of the furniture. Customers would wave their hands in front of my face when they wanted something, as if I was a malfunctioning machine instead of a human being. They'd discuss their lives, their problems, their judgments about other people, talking right through me like I wasn't even there. If you've ever felt truly invisible, like your existence doesn't matter to the people around you, hit that like button, because what I'm about to tell you about that particular Tuesday night in October will show you just how wrong we can be about our own worth. The dinner rush at Ocean's Pearl was always chaos, but that night felt different. There was electricity in the air, the kind that comes before a storm. The restaurant was packed with the usual crowd. Tech executives from Silicon Valley, local politicians, and influencers who came to take photos of their food for Instagram. The sound was overwhelming. Dozens of conversations mixing with the clatter of expensive silverware against designer plates, all of it echoing off the glass walls that faced the ocean. I was working the main dining room, carrying a tray of wine, glasses that probably cost more than I made in a day. Table 12 had ordered a bottle of Domaine de la Manicanti, and I remember thinking that single bottle could pay for my mom's medication for 3 months. The man at the table was someone I'd seen before, probably in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. He was with a much younger woman who kept checking her phone and laughing too loudly at everything he said. As I approached their table, my foot caught the edge of the rug. It was just a tiny stumble, the kind of thing that happens to everyone, but when you're carrying expensive wine and already nervous, tiny becomes enormous. The bottle tilted, and a splash of dark red wine hit the man's white shirt. The restaurant didn't go completely silent, but it felt like it did. The man's face turned red, not from embarrassment, but from pure rage. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward, and suddenly everyone was looking, not just glancing over, but really staring, the way people do when they sense drama coming. "You clumsy fat cow," he said, his voice loud enough to carry across the room. "Do you have any idea how much this shirt costs? More than you make in a year, I guarantee it." I felt my face burning with shame. My hands started shaking as I reached for napkins, trying to apologize, trying to make it right, but he wasn't done. He grabbed the napkins from my hands and threw them at my feet. "Don't touch me," he snapped. Jesus Christ. How does someone like you even get hired at a place like this? Look at yourself. You're disgusting. The woman with him was laughing now, a high-pitched sound that cut through me like glass. Other diners were pretending not to watch, while obviously watching. Some of them recording with their phones. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, and never come back up. "Sir, please," I managed to whisper, "let me get you a towel, or we can cover your dry cleaning." "Get away from me," he said, and then he did something I'll never forget. He picked up his water glass and poured it over my head. The ice-cold water ran down my face, mixing with the tears I was trying so hard not to cry. "Maybe that'll teach you to be more careful, you worthless piece of garbage." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, dripping wet, humiliated, in front of a room full of people who saw me as entertainment. My uniform was soaked, my hair was plastered to my head, and I could feel every single pair of eyes on me. Some people looked away in embarrassment. Not for me, but for themselves, for being witnesses to such cruelty. Others seemed fascinated, like they were watching a car crash. I turned and ran, not walked quickly or excused myself professionally, but actually ran through the restaurant, past the kitchen, past my coworkers who were staring with a mixture of pity and relief that it wasn't them, and into the employee bathroom where I finally let myself fall apart. Sitting on that cold tile floor, my back against the bathroom door, I cried harder than I had in years. Not just because of what had happened, but because of how normal it felt. This was my life. This was what I had accepted as my reality. I was 22 years old, and I had somehow convinced myself that this was all I deserved. But as I sat there, something started to shift inside me. Maybe it was the way the man had looked at me like I was less than human. Maybe it was the memory of my grandmother Luz telling me stories about the strong women in our family. Women who had survived so much worse than a rich man's cruelty. Or maybe I was just tired of being tired. I stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked, for the first time in years. Yes, I was overweight. Yes, my uniform was soaked and my mascara was running. But I was also young, and I was smart. And I had dreams that I'd buried so deep, I'd almost forgotten they existed. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being invisible. I was done accepting that other people's opinions of me were more important than my own opinion of myself. I didn't know how I was going to change things, but I knew I had to try. As I walked back out into the restaurant to finish my shift, holding my head a little higher than before, I had no idea that in just 3 days, a stranger would mistake me for someone extraordinary. And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't immediately correct him, but that story, that moment when everything really began to change, that's something I need to tell you about next. Because what happened when Marcus Drummond first saw me wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. It was the beginning of me finally seeing myself, 3 days after the water incident. I was still replaying that moment in my head like a broken record. The way the cold water had felt running down my face, the sound of that woman's laughter, the complete silence from everyone else in the restaurant. But something had shifted in me that night. I found myself walking differently, not hunched over trying to hide my body, but straighter. Like I was finally ready to take up the space I occupied. It was Thursday evening and I was finishing my shift at Ocean's Pearl. The dinner rush had been particularly brutal, my feet were killing me, and all I wanted was to go home, soak in a hot bath, and try to forget that tomorrow I'd have to do it all over again. The October air was crisp, coming off the ocean, and the fog was starting to roll in, creating this ethereal atmosphere around the restaurant's outdoor lighting. I was walking toward the employee exit, counting my tips for the night, when I heard someone call out behind me. At first, I didn't think they were talking to me. People like me don't get called out to on the street, especially not by voices that sound expensive and confident. "Excuse me, miss," the voice said again, closer this time. "Could I have a word with you?" I turned around and found myself face to face with a man I'd never seen before. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing what looked like a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than my annual income. His hair was perfectly styled, and he had the kind of presence that made you pay attention without even trying. But what struck me most was the way he was looking at me. Not through me, not past me, but actually at me, like I was someone worth seeing. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, assuming I'd done something wrong. "Do we know each other?" He smiled, and it was genuine. Not the fake politeness I was used to from restaurant customers. "No, we don't. But I've been watching you from across the street for the past few minutes, And I have to say, you have exactly the look I've been searching for. I glanced around, certain he must be talking to someone else. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few cars and the usual group of seagulls fighting over scraps near the dumpster. I think you might have me confused with someone else, I said. I don't think so, he replied, extending his hand. I'm Marcus Drummond. I work in entertainment development, and I've been looking for someone with your exact presence for a project I'm working on. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like something I might have heard in passing, but I couldn't place it. I shook his hand, feeling awkward in my stained uniform and non-slip shoes. I'm Seraphina, I said. Seraphina Valdez, but I think you're definitely mistaking me for someone else. I'm just a waitress. Marcus laughed, but not in a mean way. That's perfect, he said. That's exactly what I need. Someone real, someone authentic. The camera loves authenticity, and you have it in spades. Camera, I felt my stomach drop. I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not a model or an actress or anything like that. I work here, at the restaurant. I serve food and clean tables. Have you ever considered that maybe you're underestimating yourself? He asked. The way he said it wasn't condescending, but genuinely curious. Sometimes we get so caught up in who we think we are that we can't see who we might become. If you've ever had someone see potential in you when you couldn't see it yourself, let me know in the comments. Because what Marcus said next would haunt me for days. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was thick, expensive-looking cardstock with embossed lettering. I'd like to talk to you about a project I'm developing. It's about authentic stories, real people, breaking down the barriers between what we think success looks like and what it actually means. I stared at the card like it might bite me. Mr. Drummond, I really think you've got the wrong person. I'm not. I mean, look at me. I gestured to my uniform, my tired face, my entire existence. I am looking at you, he said quietly, and I see someone who's been underestimated her entire life, including by herself. That's exactly what this project needs. The fog was getting thicker, and the lights from the restaurant were creating this almost dreamlike atmosphere around us. For a moment, standing there with this stranger, who seemed to see something in me that no one else ever had, I felt like I was in someone else's life. What kind of project? I heard myself asking, even though every rational part of my brain was screaming that this had to be some kind of scam or joke. I can't give you all the details here, Marcus said, but it involves social media, authenticity, and challenging people's preconceptions about success and beauty standards. I think you could be perfect for it, but I'd need to sit down with you properly to explain everything. My hands were shaking as I took the business card. It felt substantial between my fingers. Real in a way that made this whole conversation seem less like a dream. I don't understand why you'd want me, I said honestly. Because you're real, he replied simply. In a world full of people trying to be someone else, authenticity is the rarest commodity. And you, Seraphina Valdez, are authentic in a way that can't be manufactured or taught. A car honked somewhere in the distance, snapping me back to reality. Here I was, standing in a restaurant parking lot in my stained uniform, talking to a man in a $1,000 suit about opportunities that people like me just didn't get. I should probably get going, I said, clutching the business card. My mom will be worried if I'm late. Of course, Marcus said. But Seraphina, I want you to think about what I've said. Really think about it. Sometimes the biggest risk isn't taking a chance on something new. Sometimes the biggest risk is staying exactly where you are. He walked away, toward a sleek black car that probably cost more than my family had ever owned, leaving me standing there with his business card and a head full of questions. As his taillights disappeared into the fog, I looked down at the card. Again. Marcus Drummond, Creative Director, Authentic Narratives LLC. There was a phone number and an email address, and at the bottom, in small print, it said, "Changing the conversation, one real story at a time." The walk home that night felt different. Every step seemed to echo with possibilities I'd never considered. Could someone like me really be part of whatever this Marcus Drummond was talking about? Or was this just another way the universe had of reminding me that I didn't belong in certain spaces? By the time I reached our apartment building, I'd convinced myself it was probably nothing. People didn't just walk up to overweight waitresses and offer them mysterious opportunities. Things like that happened to other people who were already beautiful and successful and confident. But as I climbed the stairs to our second-floor apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Marcus had looked at me, not with pity or disgust or the polite indifference I was used to, but with something that felt almost like respect, like I was someone worth investing time in. Mom was asleep on the couch when I got home, still in her cleaning uniform, the TV, playing some late-night infomercial about kitchen gadgets we'd never be able to afford. I covered her with a blanket and tiptoed to my room, where I sat on my bed and stared at Marcus's business card for what felt like hours. What if he was serious? What if this wasn't some elaborate joke or scam? What if someone really did see something in me that I'd never seen in myself? I walked to my dresser and looked in the mirror that hung above it. The same mirror I'd been avoiding for years, the one that reflected back everything I thought was wrong with me. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I tried to see what Marcus might have seen. Not the weight, or the cheap clothes, or the tiredness that seemed permanently etched into my face, but something deeper. Maybe it was the way I carried myself after surviving that humiliation 3 nights ago. Maybe it was the determination that had been slowly building inside me. Or maybe, just maybe, there really was something there that I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. I picked up my phone and typed Marcus's number into my contacts, though I didn't call. Not yet. But having it there, having that possibility, sitting in my phone like a tiny seed of potential, made something flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Hope. As I got ready for bed that night, I found myself moving differently in front of the mirror, standing a little straighter, making eye contact with my own reflection. Seeing not just the flaws I'd been taught to focus on, but the whole person. And for the first time in my 22 years, that person didn't look like someone who deserved to be invisible. The next morning would bring new questions, new doubts, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, my life was about to change in ways I couldn't imagine. But first, I had to decide whether I was brave enough to find out what Marcus Drummond really saw when he looked at me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see Marcus Drummond's face, hear his voice saying I had exactly what he was looking for. By morning, I'd convinced myself at least a dozen times that it was all some kind of mistake or elaborate prank, but the business card was still there on my nightstand, real and tangible, proof that the conversation had actually happened. When my alarm went off at 5 a.m., I found Mom already awake in the kitchen, sitting at our tiny table with her coffee and a piece of toast that she was barely touching. She looked exhausted, more than usual, and I could see the worry lines around her eyes had gotten deeper. "Mia," she said when she saw me, "you were tossing and turning all night. Bad dreams." I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made and sat down across from her. The morning light coming through our window was soft and gray, and I could hear the ocean in the distance. "Mom, what would you say if I told you someone offered me a job, a different kind of job?" She looked up from her toast, suddenly alert. "What kind of job, Seraphina? You didn't get yourself mixed up in anything dangerous, did you?" "No, nothing like that," I said quickly. "It's just ... This man approached me after work yesterday. He said he's looking for someone for a project, something about social media and authentic stories." Mom's expression grew skeptical. "A man approached you, Mia? That sounds like trouble. Men don't just walk up to young women with job offers unless they want something." I pulled out Marcus's business card and showed it to her. She studied it carefully, turning it over in her hands like she was looking for hidden messages. "This looks expensive," she said finally, "but that doesn't mean it's legitimate." "I know it sounds crazy," I said, "but Mom, what if it's real? What if someone actually sees something in me that could lead to something better?" The silence stretched between us. I could see her weighing her protective instincts against her desire for me to have opportunities she'd never had. Finally, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You're smart, Seraphina, smarter than you give yourself credit for. But promise me you'll be careful, and promise me you won't meet this man alone." I squeezed her hand. "I promise." The walk to work that morning felt different. I found myself looking at my reflection in shop windows. Not to criticize what I saw, but to try to understand what Marcus might have seen. When I arrived at Ocean's Pearl, I was surprised to find Diego already there, setting up tables for the lunch shift. Diego Morales was probably my only real friend at the restaurant. He was 24, openly gay, and had the kind of sharp wit that could cut through any situation. He'd started working at Ocean's Pearl about 6 months after me, and from the first day, he'd treated me like I mattered. Not because he felt sorry for me, but because he genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. "Girl, you look different today," he said as I tied my apron. "There's something in your face, like you know a secret or something." I pulled out Marcus's business card and handed it to him. Diego read it twice, then looked at me with raised eyebrows. Authentic Narratives LLC, he read aloud. Honey, what exactly happened to you yesterday? I told him everything, from the moment Marcus approached me to the conversation in the parking lot. Diego listened without interrupting, his expression growing more animated with each detail. Wait, he said when I finished. You're telling me that a man in a custom suit walked up to you and basically offered you a job in entertainment, and you're acting like this might be nothing? It has to be a mistake, I said. People like me don't get opportunities like this. Diego grabbed me by the shoulders and turned me to face him. Seraphina, listen to me. I've been watching you for 2 years, and you know what I see? I see someone who's been hiding her light under a bushel because she's afraid of what might happen if people really notice her. But baby, you can't hide forever. But what if I call him and he realizes he made a mistake? What if he takes one look at me in proper lighting and changes his mind? Then you'll be exactly where you are right now, Diego said. No worse off than before. But what if he doesn't? What if this is your chance to find out who you really are? When you're not apologizing for existing, have you ever had a friend who believed in you more than you believed in yourself? If so, hit that subscribe button, because Diego's faith in me was about to change everything. Before I could lose my nerve, I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. Marcus Drummond. Hi, Mr. Drummond. This is Seraphina Valdez. We met yesterday evening outside Ocean's Pearl. Seraphina. Of course, I was hoping you'd call. Have you had time to think about what we discussed? My hands were shaking, but Diego was making encouraging gestures from across the room. I have, and I'd like to hear more about your project, if the offer is still open. Absolutely. Are you free tomorrow evening? I'd like to meet somewhere we can talk properly, away from distractions. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop called Coastal Grounds, a quiet place about halfway between the restaurant and my neighborhood. After I hung up, Diego practically squealed with excitement. You did it, he said. You actually did it. Now we need to get you ready. Ready for what? It's just coffee, honey. This is not just coffee. This is your audition for a whole new life. We need to make sure you show up looking like the queen you are. That afternoon, during our break, Diego dragged me to the back office, where Bianca Sterling, the restaurant's owner and head chef, was going over inventory. Bianca was one of those women who commanded respect without having to demand it. She'd built Ocean's Pearl from nothing, and everyone knew she didn't suffer fools gladly. Bianca, Diego said, we need your help. Bianca looked up from her paperwork, her sharp eyes taking in both of us. What kind of help? Diego explained the situation while I stood there feeling mortified. I was sure Bianca would think I was being ridiculous, getting my hopes up over something that was probably nothing. Instead, she studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You know what, Seraphina? It's about time someone noticed what I've been seeing for 2 years. What do you mean? You think I don't watch my employees? You think I don't see how you handle difficult customers with grace, even when they treat you like garbage? You think I haven't noticed that you're one of the few people here who actually cares about doing the job right, not just getting through the shift? I felt tears prick at my eyes. In all the time I'd worked for Bianca, she'd never said anything like this to me. The way I see it, she continued, you've got 2 choices. You can keep hiding behind the idea that you're not good enough, or you can find out what happens when you stop apologizing for taking up space. Tomorrow night, you're going to find out. That evening, I went home with a strange mixture of excitement and terror churning in my stomach. When I told Mom about the coffee meeting, she insisted on coming with me partway, just to make sure I was safe. But first, she disappeared into her bedroom and came back with something I hadn't seen in years. I want you to wear this tomorrow, she said, holding up a dress I remembered from when I was younger. It was deep blue, simple but elegant, the kind of thing she'd worn to church on special occasions before we couldn't afford new clothes anymore. Mom, I can't wear that. It's too nice, and besides, it probably doesn't fit. Try it on, she said, firmly, just try it. I took the dress to my room and slipped it on, expecting it to be too small or too formal, or just wrong somehow. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw something that made me catch my breath. The dress fit perfectly, the color bringing out my eyes in a way I'd never noticed before. I looked like a different person, not thinner or prettier necessarily, but more myself somehow, like I was finally wearing clothes that matched who I was. Inside, when I came out to show Mom, she started crying. Mia, she whispered, you look beautiful. You look like the woman I always knew you could be. That night, my grandmother, Luz, called. At 78, she was still sharp as a tack and had an uncanny ability to sense when something important was happening in the family. Seraphina, she said, when I answered the phone, your mother tells me you have an important meeting tomorrow. Abuela, I don't know if it's important. It might be nothing. Let me tell you something about the women in our family, she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of wisdom. We have always been stronger than we looked. Your great-grandmother came to this country with nothing but the clothes on her back and built a life for her children. Your mother has worked 2 jobs for 20 years to make sure you had opportunities she never had. And you, Mia, you have been preparing for this moment your whole life without even knowing it. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess it up? Then you'll learn something and you'll try again. But Seraphina, the biggest mistake you can make is not trying at all. Tomorrow, you walk into that meeting like you belong there, because you do. Not because of what you look like or where you come from, but because of who you are inside. After we hung up, I sat in my room looking at myself in the mirror, wearing my mother's dress, and thinking about my grandmother's words. For the first time in my life, I tried to see myself the way they saw me, not as the girl who got water poured on her head by a cruel customer, but as someone with strength and dignity and worth. Tomorrow evening, I would walk into Coastal Grounds and find out whether Marcus Drummond really saw something in me, or whether this was all just a beautiful mistake. Be tonight, sitting in my childhood bedroom, wearing my mother's dress. I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt ready to be seen. The next evening, I stood outside Coastal Grounds for 10 minutes before I worked up the courage to go inside. The coffee shop was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and local art hanging everywhere. The kind of establishment where people brought laptops and pretended to write novels while they drank $15 I'd walked past it hundreds of times but never been inside, because places like this weren't for people like me. But tonight, I was wearing my mother's blue dress and carrying myself differently, and when I pushed open the door, the teenage barista actually smiled at me instead of looking right through me. Marcus was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, and when he saw me, he stood up immediately. Seraphina, you look lovely, he said, and the way he said it made me believe he meant it. Thank you for coming. I sat down, across from him, trying to ignore the way my hands were shaking. Thank you for the coffee, I said, gesturing to the cup he'd bought for me. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. I'm the one asking for your time. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those sharp eyes. I'm going to be completely honest with you, Seraphina, because I think you deserve honesty. When I approached you the other night, I thought you were someone else. My heart sank. There it was, the inevitable letdown I'd been expecting. I knew it, I said quietly. I knew this was too good to be true. Wait, Marcus said, holding up his hand. Let me finish. I thought you were someone else, but after our conversation, I realized you were someone much more interesting. I looked up at him, confused. I don't understand. I've been developing a project about authenticity in the age of social media. Everyone's trying so hard to be perfect, to fit into these impossible standards of beauty and success, that we've lost sight of what real looks like. When I first saw you, I thought you might be a model I'd been looking for. But when we talked, I realized you were something much more valuable. You were real. I'm still not following. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was a young woman with perfect makeup and an impossibly tiny waist, talking about body positivity while clearly having had extensive plastic surgery. This woman has 3 million followers, he said. She makes thousands of dollars posting about self-acceptance while promoting diet pills and cosmetic procedures. She's everything that's wrong with social media today. He swiped to another video, this one of a fitness influencer I recognized from the restaurant, Cassandra Ashworth, the woman who came in twice a week and always ordered a salad with dressing on the side. This one posts about loving yourself while photoshopping every single image she shares. Her entire brand is built on a lie. What does this have to do with me? I want to create content that shows people what authentic looks like. Real stories from real people who aren't trying to sell them anything except the truth. And you, Seraphina, have something that can't be bought or manufactured. You have genuine experience with struggle, with resilience, with finding worth in a world that tells you you're worthless. I felt my chest tighten. You want me to be your example of what it's like to be fat and poor? Like some kind of inspiration porn? Marcus shook his head vigorously. No, absolutely not. I want you to be yourself, but with a platform. I want to give you the tools to share your perspective, your insights, your truth, not as a victim, but as someone who survived and has something valuable to say about it. But I don't know anything about social media or influencing or whatever you're talking about. That's exactly why you're perfect for this. You haven't learned to perform authenticity yet. You just are authentic. If you've ever been offered an opportunity that scared you more than anything, but also felt like exactly what you'd been waiting for your whole life, let me know in the comments below, because what Marcus was proposing would change everything I thought I knew about myself over the next hour. Marcus explained his vision. He wanted to create a series of videos and social media content featuring real people talking about real issues, not polished, perfect people, but individuals who had something genuine to share. He'd provide professional filming, editing, and marketing support, but the content would be entirely mine to control. What would I even talk about? I asked. Whatever you want. Your experiences working in service, dealing with body image in a culture obsessed with thinness, finding strength in unexpected places. The beauty of authentic content is that it comes from your truth, not from what you think people want to hear, and people would actually want to watch someone like me. Seraphina, do you know how many young women out there feel exactly like you do? How many people are tired of being told they're not enough? You could be the voice that tells them they are enough, exactly as they are. When I left Coastal Grounds that night, I had Marcus's phone number, a preliminary contract to look over, and a filming date scheduled for the following weekend. I also had a head spinning with possibilities and terrors in equal measure. The next morning at Ocean's Pearl, I could barely concentrate on my tables. Diego kept catching my eye and raising his eyebrows, desperate for details. But I couldn't find the words to explain what was happening. It wasn't until our afternoon break that I managed to pull him aside and tell him everything. So let me get this straight, Diego said when I finished. This man wants to pay you to be yourself on the internet, and you're worried about whether you're qualified. When you put it like that, it sounds simple. But Diego, what if I'm terrible at it? What if I have nothing interesting to say? Honey, you've been making me laugh and think and feel things with your stories for 2 years. You have plenty to say. The question is whether you're brave enough to say it to more than just me. That weekend, Marcus picked me up in his sleek, black car and drove me to a beautiful house in the hills overlooking Monterey Bay. The place was stunning, all glass and modern lines, with views that probably cost more per month than I made in a year. But what surprised me was how comfortable Marcus made me feel. Despite the intimidating surroundings, the key to good content, he explained as his team set up cameras and lighting, is to forget about the equipment and just talk like you're having a conversation with a friend. My first video was simple. Marcus asked me to talk about a typical day in my life, but to really describe it. To help people understand what it felt like to move through the world in my body. With my background, facing the judgments and assumptions I faced every day. I was terrified at first, stumbling over words and forgetting what I wanted to say, but gradually, something shifted. I started talking about the customer who had poured water on my head, but also about the small kindnesses I'd experienced. I talked about my mother working 2 jobs and my grandmother's stories about family strength. I talked about the loneliness of being invisible and the surprising power that came from finally deciding to be seen. When we finished filming, Marcus showed me the footage, and I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different physically, but because I looked confident, articulate, passionate. I looked like someone worth listening to. This is exactly what I was hoping for, Marcus said. You're a natural storyteller, Seraphina. You have a gift for making people feel understood. The video went live on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had created accounts for me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all under the handle Authentic Seraphina. I spent the first hour refreshing obsessively, watching the view count climb slowly from 0 to 10 to 50. But by evening, something had changed. The comments started pouring in. Not the cruel trolling I'd expected, but genuine responses from people who said they saw themselves in my story. Young women thanking me for talking about body image honestly. Service workers sharing their own experiences with difficult customers. People from all walks of life saying they felt less alone after watching my video. Within a week, I had 1,000 followers. Within 2 weeks, 5,000. The numbers themselves weren't what mattered though. It was the messages, the stories people shared, the connections forming in the comment sections. I was becoming part of a community I'd never known existed, but success brought unexpected challenges. Other influencers in the area started noticing my growing following, and not all of them were pleased. Cassandra Ashworth, the fitness influencer I'd served countless times at Ocean's Pearl, made a video that was clearly aimed at me, though she never mentioned me by name. I'm so tired of people making excuses instead of taking responsibility for their health, she said to her camera, her perfect abs on full display. It's not body positive to promote obesity. It's dangerous and irresponsible. The video felt like a punch to the gut, especially coming from someone who'd sat at my tables dozens of times without ever acknowledging my humanity. But something unexpected happened when I posted my response. Instead of defending myself or attacking her back, I talked about the difference between health and appearance, about the assumptions people make based on body size, about the privilege inherent in having access to personal trainers and nutritionists and the time for 2-hour gym sessions every day. I'm not promoting anything except the radical idea that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their size, I said to the camera. And maybe, just maybe, we could spend less time judging other people's bodies and more time examining why we feel the need to tear each other down. That video exploded. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories about weight stigma, about the difference between health and appearance, about the exhaustion of constantly having to justify their existence to strangers. But the real surprise came the next day, when Cassandra herself showed up at Ocean's Pearl during my lunch shift. She didn't sit in my section, but she kept looking over at me throughout her meal. Finally, as she was leaving, she approached my station. "I watched your response video," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I wanted to apologize. I didn't think about how my words might affect real people. I looked at her, this woman who'd seemed so confident and untouchable, and saw something I'd never noticed before. "Vulnerability, thank you for saying that," I replied. "That means a lot." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? I think we might have more in common than I realized." As she walked away, I felt something shift in the air around me. This wasn't just about gaining followers or creating content anymore. This was about building bridges, creating understanding, changing conversations one authentic moment at a time. That night, as I was getting ready to leave work, I checked my phone and saw that my follower count had jumped to 20,000. But more importantly, I had a message from a teenage girl in Ohio who said my videos had helped her talk to her parents about the bullying she was experiencing at school. Standing there in the Ocean's Pearl parking lot, the same place where Marcus had first approached me just a few weeks earlier, I realized that everything was changing faster than I could have imagined, and the most terrifying, exhilarating part was that I was just getting started. The real test would come when I had to decide how much of myself I was willing to share with the world, and whether I could handle the scrutiny that came with having a platform. Because, as I was about to learn, visibility was a double-edged sword, and the higher you rose, the farther you had to fall. The coffee meeting with Cassandra Ashworth happened 3 days later at a small cafe I'd never been to before, tucked away from the main tourist areas where we were less likely to be recognized. I arrived early, my nerves jangling like live wires, and ordered a regular coffee while I waited. When Cassandra walked in, she looked different than she did in her videos or at the restaurant. Smaller somehow, more human, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, instead of her usual workout gear. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, as she sat down across from me. "I wasn't sure you'd want to. Honestly, I almost didn't," I admitted. "Your video really hurt." She winced. "I know, and I'm sorry. The truth is, I was jealous. Jealous of me." I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. "Of your authenticity. Do you know how exhausting it is to maintain a perfect image every single day? To never eat carbs in public? To work out until you're sick? To Photoshop every single picture because you're terrified people will see that you're not actually perfect?" I studied her face, looking for signs that this was some kind of performance, but all I saw was genuine exhaustion. "I started my fitness account when I was 21, she continued. "I thought I was promoting health, but somewhere along the way it became about selling products and maintaining an image that isn't even real. When I saw your videos, saw how people responded to your honesty, I realized how far I'd drifted from anything meaningful." Over the next hour, Cassandra told me about the pressure she felt to maintain her image, the eating disorder she'd developed, trying to stay camera-ready, the loneliness of having hundreds of thousands of followers but no real friends. In return, I shared my own struggles with feeling worthy of the platform I was building, the imposter syndrome that kept me awake at night. "What if we did something together?" she suggested as we were getting ready to leave. "A collaboration that shows people it's possible to have these conversations across different perspectives." The idea was intriguing, but I was hesitant. I don't want my audience to think I'm selling out or getting co-opted by fitness culture. What if we just had an honest conversation about body image, health, and the pressure social media puts on all of us? No agenda, no products, just two women being real about their experiences. That collaboration video, which we filmed the following week, became my most watched content to date. Seeing Cassandra admit her struggles with perfectionism while I talked about learning to value myself beyond my appearance created something powerful. The comments section became a place where people from all backgrounds shared their own stories about body image, self-worth, and the courage it takes to be vulnerable online. But success brought unexpected complications. My follower count climbed past 50,000. Then 75,000 brands started reaching out, wanting me to promote their products. Other content creators wanted collaborations. Marcus was fielding interview requests from podcasts and online publications. The attention was overwhelming, but what really started to get to me was the pressure to constantly produce content every day. I felt like I needed to have something profound to say, some insight to share, some story that would resonate with thousands of people. The spontaneity that had made my early videos so compelling was getting lost in the anxiety of performance. Worse than that, though, was what was happening at home. Mom had been supportive at first, proud that I was finding success and building something meaningful. But as my online presence grew, I could see her worry growing too. "Mia, you're different," she said one evening, as I sat at our kitchen table editing a video on my laptop. A piece of equipment Marcus had helped me buy with my first brand partnership payment. "You used to talk to me when you came home from work. Now you're always on that computer." "I'm building something, Mom. This could change our whole lives. But what if it changes you in ways we don't want?" Her words stung because part of me was afraid she was right. I was spending less time with her and more time responding to comments, planning content, attending events that Marcus arranged. The line between Seraphina the person and authentic Seraphina the brand was starting to blur in ways that made me uncomfortable. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I'd posted a video about my childhood, talking about growing up poor and the shame I'd carried about our circumstances. It was deeply personal, more vulnerable than anything I'd shared before, and I thought it was some of my best work. But the internet can be a cruel place, and success makes you a target. Within hours of the video going live, the hate comments started pouring in. Not just criticism of my appearance, which I'd learned to expect, but attacks on my family, my background, my worthiness to have a platform at all. "Another fat girl, looking for sympathy and attention," one comment read. "Maybe if you spent less time making videos and more time at the gym, you wouldn't need to beg for validation online." "This is what's wrong with society," said another. "We're celebrating obesity and making excuses for laziness." She's promoting an unhealthy lifestyle to impressionable young people. But the comment that really broke me was longer, more detailed, and cut deeper than the rest. "I've been watching your content for weeks, and honestly, you're just another fake influencer using body positivity as a gimmick to make money. You talk about authenticity, but you're selling the same thing everyone else is selling, just with a different wrapper. You're not special, you're not inspiring. You're just capitalizing on people's insecurities. The only difference between you and every other influencer is that you use your trauma as content. It's actually disgusting." I stared at that comment for what felt like hours. Was that what I was doing? Had I become the thing I'd originally set out to challenge? Was I exploiting my own pain for views and followers? Have you ever felt like you were losing yourself in the process of trying to find yourself? If that resonates with you, please hit the like button, because what happened next almost destroyed everything I'd built. I started second-guessing every piece of content, every caption, every response to comments. The joy I'd found in connecting with people got buried under the weight of analysis and self-doubt. I began drafting videos and then deleting them, convinced they weren't good enough or authentic enough or meaningful enough. The comments on subsequent videos became a minefield I couldn't navigate. For every supportive message, there seemed to be two that questioned my motives, my message, or my right to have a platform. The trolls had found me, and they were relentless. Diego noticed the change immediately. "Girl, you look like you haven't slept in days," he said during our break at Ocean's Pearl. "What's going on?" "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I admitted. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just another fake person pretending to be authentic for money. Are you out of your mind?" Diego's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Do you see the messages you get from people saying your videos helped them? Do you see how many young women are finding their voices because you found yours first? But what if I'm doing more harm than good? What if I'm just adding to the noise instead of cutting through it? Seraphina, listen to me. The people who are attacking you, they're not your audience. They're not the teenagers who message you about feeling less alone, or the women who say your videos helped them leave abusive relationships, or the parents who tell you that watching your content helped them understand their children better. You're letting the loudest voices drown out the ones that matter. But Diego's words, as well-intentioned as they were, couldn't quiet the growing chorus of doubt in my head. The pressure was getting to me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was checking my phone obsessively, reading every comment, analyzing every metric, losing sleep over engagement rates and follower counts. Marcus noticed too. "You seem stressed," he said during one of our weekly check-ins. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know if I'm cut out for this," I told him honestly. "The criticism is getting to me, and I'm starting to question whether I have anything valuable to say." Seraphina, this is normal. Everyone who builds a platform goes through this phase. The key is remembering why you started and not letting the noise distract you from your purpose. But it wasn't just the online criticism that was wearing me down, it was the way success was changing my relationships, my priorities, my sense of self. I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life, but I felt more lost than ever. The final straw came during a particularly brutal week when someone doxed me, posting my home address and encouraging people to show up at the restaurant where I worked. Ocean's Pearl had to hire extra security, and Bianca was forced to have uncomfortable conversations with regular customers about the situation. "I'm so sorry," I told her, tears streaming down my face. "I never meant for this to affect the restaurant." "It's not your fault," Bianca said firmly. "But maybe you need to take some time to figure out how to protect yourself before this gets worse." That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom surrounded by the equipment that had helped me build my platform, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. My phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, brand partnership offers, interview requests, and a steady stream of comments, both supportive and hostile. I looked at myself in the mirror, the same mirror where I'd first tried to see what Marcus might have seen in me, and I didn't recognize the person looking back. Success was supposed to feel different than this. It was supposed to feel like validation, like proof that I was worth something. Instead, it felt like I was drowning in other people's expectations and losing myself in the process. Mom found me there hours later, still staring at my reflection. My phone face down on the dresser because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. "Mia," she said softly, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Talk to me. I think I made a mistake," I whispered. "I thought this would make me feel worthy, but it's just made me feel more lost than ever. Do you want to stop?" The question hung in the air between us. Did I want to stop? Part of me desperately wanted to delete every account, return the equipment, go back to being invisible. But another part of me, the part that remembered the messages from people who said my content had helped them, wasn't ready to give up. "I don't know," I said finally. "I just know I can't keep going like this." Mom reached over and took my hand. "Then, don't take a break. Figure out what you really want, not what other people expect from you." That weekend, I made a decision that would either save my sanity or destroy everything I'd built. I was going to step away from social media, ignore the brand partnerships and interview requests, and figure out who I was when I wasn't performing authenticity for an audience. But first, I had one more video to make. One final message that would either end my journey as a content creator or transform it into something entirely different. As I set up my camera for what might be the last time, I had no idea that this moment of breakdown was actually about to become my greatest breakthrough. I sat in front of my camera for 3 hours before I finally pressed record. My face was puffy from crying, my hair was a mess, and I looked exactly like what I was, a person who had reached her breaking point. But for the first time in weeks, that felt honest. "Hi everyone," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is probably going to be my last video for a while, maybe forever. I know that's not what you want to hear, but I need to be real with you about what's been happening to me. Because if I've learned anything from this journey, it's that the truth is the only thing worth sharing." I took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera, the way Marcus had taught me in those early days when everything felt possible and nothing felt impossible. I started making videos because I wanted to show people that authenticity was more powerful than perfection. But somewhere along the way, I started performing authenticity instead of just living it. I started worrying more about what you thought of me than what I thought of myself. And that's exactly the opposite of everything I set out to accomplish. The words came easier than I expected. Maybe because I wasn't trying to be profound or inspirational. I was just being honest about my failure. The truth is, I don't know if I'm helping anyone anymore, or if I'm just adding to the noise. I don't know if sharing my pain is healing, or if it's just exploitation with a pretty filter on it. I don't know if I'm the person you think I am, because I'm not even sure who that person is supposed to be. I paused the recording and sat back in my chair. Outside my window, I could hear the ocean, the same sound that had been the soundtrack to my entire life. It occurred to me that the ocean didn't perform being the ocean. It just was. It didn't worry about whether people found it beautiful or terrible or boring. It just existed, powerfully and unapologetically. When I started recording again, something in my voice had changed. But here's what I do know, I said, and this time I wasn't whispering. I know that 3 months ago, I believed I was invisible. I believed that people like me didn't get to have voices or dreams or platforms. I believed that my worth was determined by other people's opinions of my body, my background, my right to take up space in the world. I stood up and moved closer to the camera, the way I'd seen other creators do when they wanted to make a point, but I wasn't copying them. I was finally, truly being myself. And I know that's not true. Not just because I built a following or made money or got opportunities, but because every single day, I get messages from people who tell me that seeing someone like them succeed gave them permission to believe in themselves. And you know what? That's not about me being perfect or having all the answers. That's about me being brave enough to exist loudly in a world that told me to disappear quietly. The energy in the room shifted. I could feel it, like electricity building before a storm. This was it. This was the moment I'd been building toward without even knowing it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop apologizing for existing. I'm going to stop performing authenticity and start living it. I'm going to share what I want to share when I want to share it. And I'm going to trust that the people who need to hear it will find it. I sat back down, but I kept my shoulders straight and my eyes on the camera. To the people who've been with me from the beginning, thank you for seeing something in me before I could see it in myself. To the people who've shared their stories with me, thank you for trusting me with your truth. And to the people who think I don't deserve this platform, thank you for reminding me that having a voice isn't about deserving it, it's about using it. I ended the video there and posted it immediately, before I could second-guess myself. Then I turned off my phone and went to the kitchen where Mom was making dinner. "How did it go?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. "I think I just figured out who I am," I said. The response to that video was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Within hours, it had more comments than any of my previous content. But these weren't the usual mix of support and criticism, they were stories. Hundreds and hundreds of people sharing their own moments of doubt, their own struggles with authenticity, their own journeys toward self-acceptance. But more importantly, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes anymore. I wasn't analyzing metrics or worrying about engagement rates. I was just living my life, and when something felt worth sharing, I shared it. A week later, Marcus called. "That video," he said, "was extraordinary. It's been shared over 50,000 times, and I'm getting calls from major media outlets wanting to interview you." "I'm not ready for that," I said. "Not yet. I understand. But Seraphina, what you did in that video, that vulnerability, that honesty about the struggle itself, that's what people have been missing. That's what authentic really looks like." 2 weeks after that, something happened that changed everything. I was working my usual shift at Ocean's Pearl when Bianca approached me during the dinner rush. "There's someone here to see you," she said, and there was something odd in her voice. "Table 15. I looked over and saw a woman I didn't recognize, probably in her 40s. Wearing a business suit and looking completely out of place among the usual crowd of tourists and influencers. "Seraphina Valdez," she said when I approached her table. "I'm Sarah Chen from the Monterey Community Foundation. I've been watching your videos, and I have a proposition for you." What she told me next literally took my breath away. The foundation had received a grant to create a youth mentorship program focused on media literacy and authentic self-expression. They wanted me to help design and lead it, working with teenagers who were struggling with the same issues I'd faced. He'd be teaching them not just how to create content, but how to maintain their sense of self while doing it, Sarah explained. how to use their voices without losing themselves in the process. If you've ever had a moment where you realized your pain had purpose, where your struggle became your strength, please subscribe, because what happened next proved that sometimes our biggest breakdowns lead to our most important breakthroughs. I said yes to the program, but on my terms. We'd meet twice a week, always in person, always focused on real connection over online metrics. The kids would learn about digital storytelling, but they'd also learn about boundaries, about the difference between sharing and oversharing, about finding worth that wasn't dependent on external validation. The first session was terrifying. 12 teenagers, most of them dealing with the same insecurities and pressures I'd faced, all looking at me like I might have some magic answer to make it all easier. I don't have any special wisdom, I told them, sitting in a circle in the community center's main room. I'm just someone who's made a lot of mistakes and learned from them. But here's what I can promise you: your voice matters, your story has value, and you don't have to choose between being authentic and being successful. Over the following months, I watched these kids transform. Not because I taught them how to go viral or gain followers, but because I helped them understand that their worth wasn't dependent on other people's approval. We made videos together, but we also talked about setting boundaries, about the difference between being open and being vulnerable, about how to maintain relationships when you're building a public presence. And something magical happened. My own content got better. Not more polished or professional, but more genuine, because I was creating from a place of service instead of need. Sharing to help instead of to be seen, my voice became clearer and more powerful than ever before. The breakthrough moment came 6 months later, at a community event where several of my mentorship kids were presenting their final projects. The local mayor was there, along with school board members, parents, and community leaders. It was exactly the kind of crowd that used to make me feel small and invisible. But when it was my turn to speak about the program, something incredible happened. I walked to the front of the room and felt none of the anxiety I'd expected. Instead, I felt powerful, not because I was performing power, but because I'd finally understood what real power looked like. 6 months ago, I said to the crowd, I thought success meant having thousands of people know my name, but working with these amazing young people has taught me that true success means helping others find their own names, their own voices, their own worth. I gestured to the kids sitting in the front row, their faces bright with pride and possibility. These teenagers haven't just learned how to create content, they've learned how to create lives they're proud of. They've learned that authenticity isn't a brand, it's a practice. And they've taught me that the most important audience for your truth isn't the biggest one, it's the right one. The applause that followed wasn't polite or obligatory. It was genuine, enthusiastic, and it came from people who understood that they'd witnessed something real. As I looked out at the crowd, I saw Marcus near the back, beaming with pride. I saw my mom wiping away tears. I saw Cassandra Ashworth, who'd become a genuine friend and fellow advocate for authentic representation in media. But most importantly, I saw myself reflected in the faces of the young people in the front row. Kids who now understood that their stories mattered not because they were perfect, but because they were theirs. After the event, as people were mingling and congratulating the kids on their presentations, a teenage girl named Maya approached me. She'd been one of my most resistant students at first, convinced that she had nothing valuable to say, because she didn't fit society's standards of what a successful young woman should look like. Seraphina, she said, I wanted to thank you, not just for the program, but for showing me that I didn't have to wait until I was different to start believing in myself. Standing there in that community center, surrounded by people who'd watched me grow from a girl who believed she was invisible to a woman who'd learned to take up space authentically and powerfully, I finally understood what it meant to steal the room. It wasn't about demanding attention or performing confidence I didn't feel. It was about being so genuinely, unapologetically myself that other people felt permission to do the same. It was about using my voice not to drown out others, but to help them find their own. A year later, I still work at Ocean's Pearl sometimes, but now it's by choice. I still create content, but now it serves a purpose bigger than myself. I still struggle with self-doubt, but now I have tools to work through it, and a community to support me. Most importantly, I've learned that the girl who got water poured on her head in a restaurant and the woman who now speaks at conferences about authentic leadership are the same person. The difference isn't that I changed who I was. The difference is that I finally stopped apologizing for who I'd always been. If you're still with me at the end of this story, if you've seen yourself in my struggles or found hope in my journey, then you understand that none of us are really invisible. We're just waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right person to help us see that we've been worthy of being seen all along. The room was never something I had to steal. It was always mine. I just had to be brave enough to claim it.